On Friday, after dropping my Volvo off for service, I chose to hitch a ride home with the service guy instead of going back to the office. He promised to drop the car off on his way back. With yard work awaiting, the warm, late spring day solidified my decision. While raking leaves in our expansive backyard, I spotted my brother's red Corvette pulling into the driveway, sparking concern. As I approached, I overheard my son Sam calling him Dad, which puzzled me. My brother explained he was returning Uncle Joe's circular saw, jokingly referring to me as Clueless Joe, which stung. Feeling unsettled, I discreetly recorded the conversation on my cell phone. Sam mentioned wanting to spend time at my brother's place now that school was out, revealing my wife's frequent visits there, which alarmed me. Hearing my son inquire about why my wife doesn't divorce me and move in with my brother, everything started to make sense, leaving me deeply troubled. Eric boasted that since he got your mother pregnant, he's asked her monthly about divorcing me. She refuses, citing that while you're great in bed, you'd make a terrible husband. She cherishes her relationship with her husband, not me. Despite the intense physical connection we share, her husband makes her feel loved. She loves him, not me. That's why she won't leave me, but occasionally sleeps with Eric. I have to leave now, but I'll see you at your grandparents' tomorrow for the family gathering. At that moment, my legs turned weak as I sank down the garage wall into the garden. My world shattered. Discovering my son isn't biologically mine was devastating. My wife's affair with my brother resulting in her pregnancy was overwhelming. Somehow I managed to return to my work spot, collapsing on the rope swing where I used to push my son. To his joy, I sat there, crying until a puddle formed beneath me. Before taking any action, I needed to evaluate my situation. Then it hit me. The DNA test we all took. But what if my wife tampered with the results, swapping Eric's saliva for mine? That would hide the truth about our son's parentage. Feeling betrayed, I reconsidered my reality. I'm Joe Tyndall, 43 years old, still maintaining my college weight of 175 pounds. Though my passion for running is now sidelined by family and work responsibilities, I still manage a few miles each week, sometimes participating in charity races. I hold the dual positions of Chief Finance Officer and Chief Operating Officer at Tyndall's Machine Company in my hometown, a family business spanning generations, initially founded by my great-grandfather, a blacksmith. Over time, we've evolved to specialize in precision parts for aerospace and metal replacement industries. My father, Edward, serves as president, while my brother Eric is the Chief Marketing Officer. Despite lacking a college education, my father learned his trade at a reputable trade school, whereas I hold bachelor's degrees in industrial engineering and accounting. Unlike me, my younger brother Eric, who excelled as a high school football running back, pursued a physical education degree in college, mainly to maintain his eligibility for football. Despite lacking precision skills, Eric's strong interpersonal skills and name recognition proved invaluable in cultivating and maintaining customer relationships for Tyndall's. While we occasionally clashed, such as over commission structures, ultimately, our differing roles complemented each other, contributing to the success of our family business. I first noticed my wife Carol during a charity 5K run, where her exceptional physique caught my eye. Despite my fair share of encounters with attractive women, Carol's appearance stood out, with her narrow waist and perfectly proportioned muscles. Though initially infatuated, it was her stumble during the race that led to our first conversation, eventually sparking our relationship. Carol, an English teacher with a degree in secondary education, and I married a year after our chance encounter. Despite our desire to start a family, conception proved elusive despite our efforts to time copulation meticulously. Reluctant to undergo fertility tests, we focused on enjoying our relationship. It wasn't until Carol missed her period twice that we realized our joyous news. Growing up, I learned that family was crucial, especially in our tight-knit community where the Tyndall family had a long-standing presence. Family photos adorned our parents' house, showcasing our pride in our lineage. Carol's pregnancy had its challenges. She was bedridden for the last 2 months, and the delivery was complicated, nearly costing both her and our newborn son's lives. Sam, our son, grew too large for a natural birth, necessitating a cesarean. During the procedure, the doctor warned us of the severe risks involved in future pregnancies, prompting us to opt for surgery to prevent any further danger to Carol's life. Sam's birth made him all the more precious to us, as we knew he would be our only child. Sam was an energetic child, always active and fond of roughhousing with me, though Carol wasn't always thrilled about it. As he grew, our bond began to strain, especially after his 15th birthday. Our once close relationship deteriorated as he became increasingly distant, absorbed in his phone and games. He seemed to resent my profession as an accountant, viewing it as less masculine compared to others. It was evident that he had outgrown me physically and emotionally, causing tension between us. Over the years, Carol remained an exemplary wife, excelling in her role as principal at McKinley School, which caters to students facing academic and social challenges such as fighting. However, the stress of managing disruptive students occasionally led to conflicts at home, with Carol expressing frustration over trivial matters. Despite this, our closeness remained strong, with no issues in our bed life. My world was rocked when I overheard my brother confessing to Sam that he was Sam's biological father, implying a long-term affair with Carol. Doubt gnawed at me, especially considering Sam's resemblance to both my brother and father, leaving me questioning the truth. That evening, I scrutinized Carol's behavior for any signs of infidelity, but found none. We shared a lively dinner, and later, when alone in the kitchen, Carol surprised me by wearing nothing but a lace apron. Despite my suspicions, our closeness that night was passionate and genuine, affirming our love for each other. The following Saturday, we headed to my parents' house for lunch to celebrate Edward's 70th birthday. Carol preferred her Lexus over my Volvo, and Sam wanted to drive separately. As we arrived, my mother, Sally, greeted us with hugs in a specific order. Carol, Sam, then me, mirroring the sequence for Edward. Observing Eric's interaction with Carol, I noticed his enthusiastic embrace towards Sam, followed by an insincere hug from Carol. This unexpected reaction fueled my suspicions about their long-standing affair. My attempt to subtly probe for answers resembled Inspector Clouseau's clumsy investigation style, hoping to uncover any hidden truths. During a lull in conversation, I casually inquired about Eric's availability to cover for me at the office, knowing full well his lack of understanding of accounting processes. His cryptic response about a big project confirmed my suspicions, evident from Carol's uneasy reaction. Silence filled the room, devoid of any sound save for the stillness. It was quieter than midnight in a graveyard. All eyes darted between the five of them, a clear indication that they were aware of the infidelity. Beneath my facade of cluelessness, I grasped the situation. Dad initiated the conversation, expressing pride in our family's land and business legacy. He announced his retirement as president of Tyndall, with Eric succeeding him. However, the unequal salary structure, favoring Eric, left me uneasy. Carol's supportive gesture couldn't alleviate my concerns. The prospect of Eric, lacking essential knowledge, leading the company seemed disastrous. Eric's assertion of dominance over me only fueled my frustration. It seemed once again, I was destined to lose. "All right, enough," Dad asserted. "Eric, you're not taking the helm. I'm still chairman and hold all the stock. You'll run the business as I say. This company's been in our family for a century, and I won't let it go south on my watch. We're Tyndalls, with our legacy in our hands, like those men on the wall." Dad gestured to the family portraits. "So chill out." "Speaking of which, Dad, which one's your grandfather?" I inquired. "My grandfather's on the left. Next to him is my father, and I'm on the far end," Dad answered. Glancing at the pictures, I realized I looked nothing like any Tyndall. "I don't get it," I admitted. My mother's demeanor changed. "Joe, it's time you knew," Dad confessed. "Your mother and I planned to marry, but she got pregnant at her bachelorette party while we were carnal. We thought you were mine until a DNA test proved otherwise when you were 10. But Eric was. Well, that cleared up some questions about how I was treated compared to Eric. It wasn't the bombshell I expected. I was probing for answers about Sam's biological father and got hit with this bombshell instead. Everything had flipped upside down. There wasn't much I could do now, but it left me with more questions. Finally, Mom spoke up saying, "That doesn't mean we love you any less than Eric. We raised you as our own, and we still see you as our son." It was comforting to hear from her. But how did this tie into what I overheard Sam and Eric saying? "All right, Dad, that explains my body type. But why doesn't Sam resemble me like you and Eric? Here's another curveball for them. Joe, you and Carol struggled to conceive. It weighed heavily on Carol, fearing she couldn't fulfill your wishes. She recalled your mumps and worried you might be sterile. Your mother and I thought Eric could provide what you couldn't. We hoped to keep it hidden. But DNA tests and physical differences between Tyndall and non-Tyndall bodies made it inevitable." My mind was overwhelmed with emotions, swirling like a tornado. I couldn't find the words to comprehend this discovery. Both my mother and wife hugged me tenderly, tears in their eyes. Mother whispered, "My son, I'm so proud of you." Carol murmured. "My husband, I love you so much." Dad said, "We hoped you'd understand and feel the love your family has for you." "Oh, can I call you Edward now that I know you're not my father?" "Why would you think I wouldn't be hurt by this?" Sam snapped. "Now you understand the humiliation I've endured. Having kids think you're my father instead of a real man like Eric Jez," Sam retorted, drawing everyone's attention with a slap to his face. Carol interjected, "Joe's been an exceptional father to you, sparing no effort to make you happy." "I've seen plenty of kids with worse fathers, but none better," I added sarcastically. "Consider yourself lucky to have him." "Why wait so long to reveal this concern for my feelings?" I challenged. "Why not rip off the bandage instead of deceiving me all these years? You must have had some laughs behind my back as I boasted about my great son, while you called me clueless Joe." Once again, silence dominated the room. "We couldn't tell you, Joe. It would have hurt too much, and we hoped it wouldn't come to light," Dad explained. "Plus, we needed you at the plant. You're the brains and creativity behind the operation. Losing you would have been catastrophic, and frankly, we couldn't afford to replace you. Headhunters showed us salaries for CFO and COO positions, more than double what we pay you." "I can't wrap my head around all of this," I exclaimed. "You encouraged my brother to impregnate my wife for a Tyndall heir, not mine. You kept me underpaid to boost profits. You made me believe I'd run the show one day. But apparently Tyndall blood matters more than competence." "I can't take any more surprises today," I continued bitterly. "Next, you'll probably tell me my beloved wife is still sleeping with my despicable brother. The big reveal. Will she confess or continue lying as she has for 17 years? Once again, silence filled the room. Eyes darted between the culprits, none daring to deny the grave transgression. Finally, a feeble voice whispered, "I'm sorry, Gio, truly sorry, but you must understand the pressure and stress I face at work. I don't love him, I despise him for who he is, but I need him to maintain my sanity." With that, she collapsed to the floor. My instinct urged me to comfort her, but reason intervened. She brought this upon herself and now must face the consequences. "Sorry about this, son, but we've—" "Son, what hypocrisy!" I interrupted. "You've shattered my entire existence, showing me minimal affection compared to Eric, encouraging my wife's betrayal and pushing Eric's spawn onto my mind, all while laughing at my obliviousness." I stormed towards the exit, hurling a heartfelt "screw you" at each one. Just as I reached the door, a hand gripped my arm. "I'll stop seeing your wife. She's all worn out anyway," Eric declared. The audacity infuriated me. I tried to leave, but Eric spun me around. Seizing the opportunity, I aimed a punch at his nose, but missed, striking his throat instead. His eyes bulged, and he collapsed, gasping for air. This was my final opportunity. Stepping back, I delivered a forceful kick to his groin, eliciting a blood-curdling scream. Carol and Sam rushed to his side, their reactions contrasting. While Sam tried to console his mother's partner, he hurled insults at me. Carol, meanwhile, unleashed her fury, kicking Eric relentlessly. Leaving the chaos behind, I drove Carol's car into Eric's Corvette and grazed Edward's F-150 in my distress. Seeking solace, I pulled into an abandoned gas station, where waves of sorrow and rage washed over me. Beating the dashboard in frustration, I eventually succumbed to exhaustion. Amidst the turmoil, Carol's attempts to reach me went unanswered. Taking a deep breath, I pondered my options. There was no reversing the damage done. I was not only a betrayed man, but also not biologically related to my supposed father. It was a complete mess I found myself in. Just days ago, I felt on top of the world. Now it seemed like everything had turned to crap. But amidst the chaos, I saw potential avenues. Option 1. Continue in ignorance, accept a raise, but work under Eric or Edward. However, the thought of seeing Eric and Carol every day filled me with dread. Option 2. Vanish quietly, leaving the Tyndall family to their own devices. Yet they hadn't cared much for me before, so why would they after? Neither option appealed to me. Option 3, stay and infiltrate the family, but not for their benefit. I wanted to make them regret every wrong they'd inflicted upon me. Yes, door number 3 was my choice. With my house 20 miles away, I had to act swiftly. I left the damaged car in the yard and packed essentials into my Volvo. Bullet, Sam's dog, lingered around, a constant annoyance. But even his parting gift, a pile of excrement, couldn't dampen my resolve to leave. Amid laughter, I carried the fresh dog waste into our bedroom, placing it on our wedding ring quilt, a sentimental piece stitched with wedding ring patterns and fabric from our childhood clothes. I topped it with my wedding ring, a clear symbol Carol would understand. Meanwhile, I stacked and hammered nails through all the framed pictures of her and Eric's son, shattering the glass. With my loaded Volvo, I checked into an extended stay hotel across town, then swapped it for a rental car to avoid detection. Next, I stashed Sam's car in a storage unit, intending to sell it later. Over pizza and beer in my room, I focused on financial tasks, securing my funds and closing joint accounts. I left Carol 2 paychecks worth in our account, taking the rest, including Sam's college fund, which I'd withdrawn over time. Sleep was elusive as I grappled with memories of happier times. But realizing my loved ones didn't care, I embraced a new identity, not clueless Joe, but Formidable Joe. Tomorrow, Formidable Joe plans to make his move at Tyndall Manufacturing. With Sunday being a quiet day at the office, it promises some amusement. Oddly enough, this thought helped me rest easier. Parking my rental car at a safe distance from the entrance, I avoided arousing suspicion. Disabling and reactivating the security system, I made my way to my office. As CFO, I held the keys to all financial accounts. Consolidating funds into the main account, I left enough for 2 staff paychecks, maxed out the line of credit, and wired the rest to our Cayman Islands account, a long-standing hub for international transactions. Next, I secured every account with new login details, ensuring no access for the foreseeable future. Chuckling to myself, I altered the postal address and sent closure notices for utilities and services. Thanks to our cloud-based system, I wiped out any trace of financial records and changed access permissions. Even the CNC machines received updated login details. Then, I delved into Eric's computer, uncovering incriminating videos. Saving them for later, I left his computer untouched, savoring the anticipation of future retribution. The utility room was my final destination, a stronghold of sorts. Enclosed by concrete walls, it housed the main electricity line for Tyndall Manufacturing. With our heavy power consumption, a misstep could turn someone to ash in an instant. Only the electrician and I had access to this room, and bureaucratic procedures would delay any service shutdown. Meanwhile, I shut down operations and replaced the locks, ensuring a delay in restoring power once they realized the main transformer box was tampered with. As I left, I tossed all the keys into a bucket of cleaner fluid, erasing their identities. It was bittersweet to walk away from the building I had hoped would be my lifelong workplace. Dreams of leading Tyndall Manufacturing with Sam as my successor turned to nightmares. Having attended numerous industry conventions during my time at Tyndall, I now saw them as potential job hunting grounds. Ignoring countless messages from my family, their apologies and justifications rang hollow. My mother's plea for forgiveness for her past actions echoed, yet I couldn't reconcile with Carol and Sam's betrayal over 17 years. On Tuesday morning, I reached out to my attorney, Bob Carson, to discuss my options and seek representation. He had an available slot at 3 p.m., so I returned to my apartment to gather the necessary documents. My strategy was leaning towards filing for divorce on grounds of infidelity, though relocating my wife out of state for that seemed unlikely. Nonetheless, I expressed my desire to avoid paying child support and proposed a 50-50 split of assets. Since I lacked stock ownership in Tyndall Manufacturing and relied solely on a modest salary and patent income, my attorney anticipated a straightforward process unless she contested. We aimed to file the paperwork promptly, preferably at her school, where she had humiliated me for years. During our meeting, I disclosed the rearrangement of Tyndall funds, leveraging my CFO authority to move money between banks without embezzling. While my attorney cautioned against potential legal repercussions, I reasoned that my limited assets wouldn't justify their legal expenses. He emphasized the need for a $3,000 retainer check and advised caution in potential legal battles. Soon, I found myself in 3 meetings where companies sought my services and access to my patents. With supportive friends in town, I didn't want to burden them, so leaving seemed the best option. At 43, starting anew seemed my only way out of this mess. A week later, Bob Carson alerted me to a situation at the county attorney's office. Edward accused me of embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand theft. However, all funds remained securely in a Tyndall account. Edward's aversion to flying, especially over water, hindered his ability to handle the matter in the Caymans. A month after Carol received divorce papers, my attorney asked if I had responded to her attempts at communication. I hadn't entertained any contact from her. Legal hurdles emerged, with Carol contesting my claim to Sam's college fund and car. Despite doubts about winning in court, I proposed concessions. If unsatisfied, I threatened legal action, alleging fraud for my belief in being Sam's father. A week later, the lawyer conveyed that Carol was ready to sign the papers, but she requested an hour with me. I reluctantly agreed, stipulating that only Carol and I would meet and recording the session for security. The following week, I parked in my old driveway, wary of unfamiliar vehicles. Carol awaited my arrival, offering no seductive gestures. Instead, stacks of paperwork symbolized the final dissolution of our marriage. There was no romance left. It was a mere formality. Over the next 15 minutes, she repeated familiar excuses and apologies straight from the cheater's playbook. Her words didn't move me. I stopped counting the "I'm sorries" and "can we fix this?" She even brought up history, trying to justify my alleged wrongs. When she asked for specifics, I stayed calm, leading her to confess. Too many. Her voice trembling. There was no anger in my face, just a deep sense of detachment. Seeing my disinterest, she tried to engage me. "Do you have any questions?" I met her eyes and asked, "Why?" Letting out a sigh, she began her explanation. I felt pressured into having Eric's child. Edward insisted on continuing the Tyndall bloodline, fearing Eric's offspring wouldn't meet our family's standards. Even when we tried for Sam, I hoped it would be yours, but I made a huge mistake. The thought of labeling her with the same term Edward despised was tempting. "I'll let her stew in her own guilt for a while," I retorted. "Your reasoning is disgusting, Carol. Continuing with Eric after getting pregnant, was that to keep our family together? Did you enjoy secretly humiliating me?" I yelled, "No, Carol, that was about you, not me. You vowed to be faithful, yet you slept with my brother. Who thinks that's okay? It doesn't matter if I knew." I misspoke, Joe. What I meant was, it was more about me than you. When I chose to have Eric's child, I realized he wasn't as attentive as you. He was selfish, focused on his own pleasure, not mine. I couldn't wait to be free from his demands. Once pregnant, I ended things with him. From then on, my attention was on you, the man who truly loved and respected me. After experiencing your care, I valued you even more. So you returned to him because I was too good a lover? That's absurd. This may sound harsh. Hey, this whole Eric thing sounds terrible. Come on, just hurry up and tell me this sad, sad story about how you had to deal with the big bad man. It didn't please you, did it? Please, Joe. I've only got an hour left to tell what's left of my life with you. I still love you, but I know I've ruined my chance with you. I just want to convince you that what I did was completely unrelated to my relationship with you. You were wonderful to me, the best husband a woman could ever have, but I have a flaw. I've been very successful in my life, and sometimes it goes to my head. I start to think I'm better, smarter, and more intelligent than my peers. I lose my compassion for others and act like an arrogant witch. And you know I do. I needed a man to be cruel to me, and Eric fit the bill. Joe, this flaw was manifested after your mother and father convinced me to get pregnant by Eric rather than you. You mean when you were bred like a farm animal? I interjected. I suppose it was somewhat like that. There were no expressions of love. We undressed, had lovemaking, and I left with no post-lovemaking cuddling. Kissing on the lips wasn't permitted. I found that I enjoyed lovemaking, not the loving, tender lovemaking we had. My world would consist of his large tool slamming into me with unbridled passion as my hair was pulled back. So I faced the ceiling. My husband, my school, and my family did not exist. Only the fireworks inside my skull and raging heat in me. After climaxing together, I'd swiftly shower, dress, and leave, without even a goodbye kiss. There was no set schedule for our next encounter. I'd only reach out to him when I craved rough, primal lovemaking. Sometimes it happened twice a month, other times there'd be a 3-month gap. Eric didn't mind how often I visited him. To put it simply, Joe, I returned to Eric because it humbled me. I needed to be taken off my pedestal and stop being so arrogant. Rough lovemaking fulfilled a need I couldn't control. It wasn't because you were lacking as a lover. I had a different need altogether. Moreover, I felt ashamed to have you treat me with the tenderness and affection I sought from Eric. You're a caring, loving person who always treated me like royalty. Instead of seeking therapy, I used him to address my superiority complex. Looking back, I realize I made a huge mistake, and I'm sorry for hurting the best man I've ever known. Someday, when this is all behind us, I hope you'll remember the moments of happiness we shared. That's quite a story. But do I really have all the facts, or is there more? I asked. She replied softly, "Yes, you know everything." "Are you sure?" I pressed. "Let's see what I might have missed." "When was the last time you were carnal with him?" I inquired. "It was after that awful incident at your parents' house when I was kicking his kidneys," she confessed. "And did he use protection?" I questioned. She shook her head. "Did you ever consider the risk of contracting an STD from Eric?" I probed further. She responded with a shrug, indicating uncertainty. Did we ever have lovemaking on the same day you were with Eric? I asked. She paled at the question. I always douched afterward, both there and at home, she responded. But that doesn't answer my question. How many times, Carol? I pressed. Not many, Joe, but there were times when you really wanted closeness, and I didn't want to turn you away. On those occasions, I suggested mouth lovemaking instead of copulation, she explained. Now that you've circled around the question, let's get to the truth. Did you ever give me sloppy seconds? I questioned. I didn't keep track of that. I didn't want to hurt you, but there may have been a few times over the years when it happened. I can't give you a specific number, but it's possible, she admitted. The lasagna I had for lunch at Mama Anna's Ristorante churned in my stomach like the bubbling lava of Vesuvius. The thought of having sloppy seconds was too much to bear. Just like Vesuvius, the hot lava erupted from my mouth in a violent projectile vomit. The table and Carol were suddenly covered in the remnants of my previous meal. I stumbled to the door, leaving a trail of half-digested food behind. Carol's sobs pierced my ears as I left. Apparently, she wasn't fond of vomit on her carpet or dress. Unfortunately, my attorney had to reprint the documents, as no one at the courthouse would handle them after the incident. 2 weeks later, the divorce was finalized, with me receiving half of the college fund and car proceeds. She gets to keep the house until our son finishes high school. I'm sure he was upset, but since he no longer wanted me in his life, I took my money and left. Since I wasn't the biological father, I refused to pay child support if required by the court. I changed the filing to infidelity and threatened to sue all the Tyndalls for fraud. No one wanted that scandal. I was already ashamed to be associated with the Tyndall name. During my self-imposed isolation, I debated whether to review the video files I had obtained from Eric's office. I was still reeling from the knowledge of Carol's infidelity, let alone ready to watch two people engaged in closeness. I despised the thought of lovemaking. Each file had a name, and a chill ran down my spine as I saw the name Sindra on one of the smaller files. Sindra was the wife of one of my best friends, John Brown. John was 2 years ahead of me in high school, and we had little interaction, as he was a popular athlete and I was a nerdy outsider. But this geek was chosen to assist the athlete in his mandatory English class. While he excelled in science and math, he struggled in English throughout the semester. We developed a friendship until he departed for a small college on a football scholarship. After graduating, he returned to our town to be close to his elderly parents. He approached me about employment, and I was pleased to see that the focus was on math and engineering, which suited our shop well. Upon my recommendation, he was hired, and we rekindled our friendship. A couple of years ago, John and Sindra encountered a rough patch in their relationship. From what I gathered, Sindra had a night out with her girlfriends and either got medicated or drank too much, leading to her having lovemaking with another man. She felt ashamed and confessed to John upon returning home, but the damage was done. They had 2 young boys at this point, and divorce would have been disastrous. The Sindra video was the shortest and showed her stumbling into a hotel room. It was evident that a cell phone camera was positioned on a dresser. She moved like a zombie and fixated on the king-size bed. Eric appeared and undressed the disoriented Sindra. Initially, I thought there was no audio, but it was because there was no conversation. While I had admired Sindra in a bikini at the lake, seeing her standing undressed left me speechless. Now I understood why John was reluctant to let her go. Eric forcefully seated her on the bed, devoid of any tenderness or affection. He proceeded to have copulation with Sindra until he reached climax. After satisfying himself, he grabbed a drink from the mini-fridge and lit a cigarette. Slowly, Sindra made her way to the bathroom, composed herself, got dressed, and left. Throughout this encounter, neither of them uttered a word. John had always been curious about what had transpired, and now I had some evidence in case he sought revenge. I invited John over to my apartment for a private discussion. After a couple of beers, he inquired about the confidential matter. Unaware of my discovery, I informed John that I had stumbled upon a video of his wife engaging in carnal activity with another man. It seemed to me that she may have been medicated, intoxicated, or both. I offered to reveal the identity of the man, show him the video, or both, whichever option would cause him the least pain. It took some time for John to compose himself. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he took deep breaths. I placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, but remained silent. "Whoa," was his only response. "It's my brother, Eric, but she despises him, thinks he's an idiot. Why would she sleep with Eric?" As I mentioned John, She appeared to be out of it. I'll show you the video to prove she wasn't the one initiating the encounter. After watching the video, John recognized the unnamed man who had copulation with his wife after a girls' night out several years ago. She didn't know his name or the reasons behind their encounter. As she tearfully recounted the story to John, he tried to remain calm and asked why this man would sleep with an employee's wife. She explained that it was a one-time occurrence and he never contacted her again. My guess, John, is that he didn't care about her name. He just medicated the most attractive woman and had lovemaking with her. He didn't need to know her name, just her body, I concluded. As John stood up, he expressed gratitude, stating that this revelation was surprisingly helpful. He mentioned forgiving her previously because of her remorse and distress. Now, armed with the facts, he wasn't sure whether to share them with Sindra or not, deciding to play it by ear. He asked if he could have the video, to which I agreed, stating that it was likely the only copy. He joked about potentially causing accidents to his brother in the future, ensuring his alibis were solid. We embraced, and as he left, he told me to keep in touch, acknowledging our close bond. I didn't invest much time in reviewing the videos of Carol and Eric. It simply wasn't worth the effort and messed with my head. Eventually, I decided to delete all the videos with Carol's name on them. I never wanted to see those recordings again. However, fate intervened as I was deleting the files, causing me to hit play instead of delete. What I witnessed was more repulsive than I had anticipated. Carol was on her knees, facing the camera with a euphoric expression. It was clear she wasn't lying when she said her husband, family, friends, and school were forgotten when she was with Eric. She seemed to be thoroughly enjoying herself, even barking like a witch. Seeing the woman I once loved debasing herself in such a manner was devastating. This scene shattered every positive thought I had ever harbored about her. 2 weeks later, John visited for a beer to express his gratitude for providing answers to questions that had plagued him for years. He also thanked me for confirming that Sindra had been carnally assaulted, not engaged in an affair. He proposed using the remaining recordings to expose cheating wives and assist husbands who had been hurt by Eric's actions. I willingly handed over the remaining videos to him. Meanwhile, my job search efforts were paying off. A competitor of Tyndall's reached out to me for an interview in their city, located 100 miles away. This brought a glimmer of happiness after a long period of turmoil. I made myself available for the interview at their convenience. The Donan Corporation, led by CEO and President Tim Donan, offered me an attractive employment package similar to my peers. The next step was meeting with the head of Reynolds Resources for a personality evaluation. Given my recent experiences, I couldn't help but worry about what they might uncover. The following morning, I was scheduled to meet with Mickey D. Reynolds, the owner of Reynolds Resources. Besides personality evaluations, Reynolds Resources handled HR duties, employee recruitment, corporate governance, and reporting for various industries, including donut manufacturing. Tim had mentioned how this relieved him of administrative burdens, as he preferred projects over paperwork. Their office boasted a modern and sleek design, a departure from Donan's more traditional manufacturing setting. After providing my name to the receptionist, I was offered coffee and a seat on the couch until Mickey D. would see me again. To my surprise, Mickey D. turned out to be an attractive woman, likely in her early 30s. She didn't seem fazed by my initial stumbling for words as we shook hands, her grip firm yet feminine, which I found quite appealing. Over the next couple of hours, we delved into discussions about my qualities, preferences, and engineering philosophy. Our exchanges were courteous and enjoyable. She delicately broached the subject of why I was departing from my long-standing position at Tyndall. While she knew she wasn't supposed to ask personal questions, she left the door open for me to share anything I felt comfortable with. All I disclosed was that I had been overlooked for the position of president and felt underpaid for my responsibilities. "Oh goodness, Joe, it's already 11:45, and I imagine you must be hungry for lunch," she remarked. "I'll forward my report to Tim, and he'll provide you with more details." Then she inquired if it would violate company protocol for her to invite me to lunch, akin to giving the new employee a tour of the Chamber of Commerce. With a sly smile, she added, "I'd love to do that." And so began the first of many lunches, which gradually evolved into dinners, and more over the ensuing months. I was hesitant to embark on a new relationship, but I found joy in her company. From her responses, it seemed she appreciated the gradual pace and the development of our friendship. Meanwhile, Tyndall Manufacturing was facing financial woes. Despite having sufficient cash to settle all obligations, the funds were inaccessible. Edward had to act swiftly as vendors, and suppliers were pressing for payment. He resorted to utilizing emergency funds to keep the company solvent. Nevertheless, the damage to the company's reputation was severe. Suppliers demanded upfront cash payments, severely impacting their operational finances. Gradually, I shared the details of the upheaval in my personal and professional life with Mickey D. She was empathetic, having experienced her own turmoil when her husband was tragically eliminated by a UPS truck 2 years prior. In the meantime, John informed me of an incident where someone attacked Eric in a dimly lit bar parking lot. After enduring several blows from a steel pipe, Eric pleaded for mercy. The assailant seized Eric's middle finger and forcefully bent it until it snapped, citing, "That's for sticking your finger in my wife." My employment at Donen brought immense happiness into my life. As I settled into my new role, unbound by any non-compete agreement with Tyndall, I began to attract the best customers they had. They were aware of my departure from Tyndall and welcomed my contact information. While I didn't possess Eric's salesmanship skills, I understood their needs and how to fulfill them more efficiently, rapidly, and affordably than Tyndall. 6 months later, after finalizing my divorce, my relationship with Mickey D blossomed. Beyond her beauty, intelligence, and compassion, she was a delight to be around. After numerous dates and deepening our connection, our interactions became increasingly physical. One evening, it became evident to me that Mickey was receptive to the idea of being carnal with me. As we danced closer than usual, she recognized my interest in her. As her leg brushed between mine, she gazed up with those captivating eyes and suggested, "Shall we head out?" "Absolutely," I replied, kissing her with even more intensity than before. We couldn't resist each other on the journey home. It was almost reckless. But with endorphins surging, how could we restrain ourselves? There was no competition of buttons popping or shirts ripping. Instead, we slowly undressed each other in her bedroom, exploring unfamiliar territories with our hands. Our breathing and heart rates accelerated. "Did you bring protection?" she whispered in my ear. "No, I'm sterile. That's why Carol had Eric's baby." "What did the doctor say about your sterility?" "No, doctor. My mom claimed I had mumps as a kid, rendering me unable to impregnate Carol. But she's the same woman who deceived you about your paternity and encouraged your wife to cheat with your brother. If I were you, I wouldn't trust anything she said. You should get your own doctor's opinion. Now I'm ready for some amazing lovemaking." By morning, we had engaged in lovemaking at least 4 times, and I suspected she had surpassed that number. After expending all our carnal energy, the topic of my fertility arose. I pledged to visit a fertility specialist and undergo testing, though I'd have to wait a week for my body to regenerate anything close to the seed fluid count I had this weekend. Following an embarrassing stint in the doctor's office, I was instructed to return in a week for the results. Since Mickey was invested in this topic, I invited her to join me for the next appointment. The doctor quickly informed us that I wasn't infertile. My seed fluid count totaled a modest 25 million, below the average range of 50 to 100 million, but with mobility meeting the average standard. He advised that unless we were eager to conceive immediately, we needn't worry about fertility issues. Perhaps some vitamins and abstaining from excessive drinking could provide a slight boost. The best approach, he suggested, was not to obsess over conception. It's like a game of roulette, with your seed fluid meeting your partner's egg by chance. While the odds were slim, they weren't impossible. Mickey resumed birth control while I used contraceptives for a few months. We contemplated moving in together, perhaps after the holidays. But first, she wanted me to meet her parents. They were under the impression she was dating a wonderful guy. That's what she claimed anyway, and they were eager for him to visit. Perhaps this marked the start of a real family for me once again. I felt a bit nervous as we approached a sizable yet modest house. Just as the door swung open, Mickey D stepped forward, clasping the man in gray slacks and a red Christmas sweater. She turned slightly to the right and introduced, "Daddy, I want you to meet the man I love, Joe Tyndall. Joe, meet my father." I cut in, "Mr. Donen Ops. Tim, I had no idea she was your daughter. Wow, I'm at a loss for words. Say, nice to see you, Tim, and come inside. Why didn't you tell me Tim was your father? Wouldn't that be something I'd want to know?" "Yes, Joe. That's exactly why we kept it from you. I wanted to see if you were interested in me or my inheritance. Plus, I didn't want any trouble from employees about you dating the boss's daughter and potential heir to the company. Like me, she had a younger brother who passed away at 16. So, what does being invited to Christmas dinner with your folks mean for me? Is this strictly personal, or does it affect us? Joe, it means I love you and want you to meet my family. It's separate from our relationship. Since you told me you have no family, I'm inviting you to spend Christmas with mine. Okay, so now I know about Mickey D. The D stands for Donan. I'm really clueless, huh? She giggled, teasing. Maybe you should add a D to your name for duh. We all shared a laugh at that. With everything clarified, we had a delightful afternoon and evening. I enjoyed getting to know Tim and Mickey's mother, Barbara. Though I may be clueless, I had a feeling that asking for Mickey's hand in marriage would be welcomed by her parents. While I was confident Mickey would say yes, given my experiences, I didn't want to take anything for granted. My intuition proved right, as Mickey leaped off the couch and onto me. As I knelt with a blue velvet box in hand, she paused her kisses to gasp, "Yes, yes, yes," before resuming her affectionate embrace, leaving me breathless in the best way possible. 3 months later, we had a small wedding. On my side of the church, it was just John, Sindra, and a few new friends. After a honeymoon in the Caribbean, we returned to my apartment to begin our life together. Our first priority was for Mickey to stop taking birth control pills. We knew it might take some time before my seed fluid met her egg. So we embraced the journey ahead with optimism. We went to the county courthouse to change our names. Mickey D. Reynolds reverted to her maiden name, Mickey Donan. With society's more accepting stance on gender identity, marital status, and personal names, I chose to become Joseph Timothy Donan. When we sought Tim's approval, he was both honored and delighted that I embraced the Donan name. With tears in his eyes, he whispered, "Thank you, son." My friend John stumbled upon a file of Carol involved with Eric and felt the urge to retaliate for both of our betrayals. John's son Tyler was the same age as the boys at Carol's school and participated in sports with them. Tyler provided John with the email addresses of several junior and senior boys. Under a new alias, John sent each of these boys a copy of the video of Carol and Eric with the subject line, "Principal's Lesson in Class 101." A week later, as Carol walked down the school hallway between classes, she heard someone sharply barking, which struck her as odd. Turning toward the sound, she found a small group of senior boys smirking at her. Initially, she suspected a wardrobe malfunction. As she turned back, she was startled by barking sounds from a different group of boys. Recalling the school mascot, a bulldog, she presumed it was some kind of team-building activity for the upcoming Friday night game. Upon entering the office, the barking ceased. However, when she stepped out, it resumed from one end of the hall to the other. It sounded like a kennel at feeding time, with occasional howls mixed in. The next morning, as soon as she stepped onto the concrete parking lot, it resembled the starting line of an Alaskan Iditarod dog sled race, with all eyes on her. Hurriedly retreating into the building, she felt relieved as the doors swung shut behind her. However, as she walked to her office, she heard a single male voice bark like a dog, sounding eerily like Eric's. Realization struck her. The boys had a copy of the videos depicting the carnal acts with Eric. She bypassed the question of how the video got out and went straight to the realization of the potential fallout on her job, career, and dignity. She swiftly dashed into her office and slammed the door shut. Were her staff members smirking at her? Did they know what happened? Who had seen the video? What should she do now? Midway through the first school class hour, when the halls were deserted, she bolted out of her office. Over her shoulder, she announced she felt sick and was heading home. It wasn't a lie. She genuinely felt unwell. However, instead of going home, she sped down the street to Tyndall MFG. Bursting into Eric's office, she demanded, "Did you distribute videos of us screwing? If you did, I swear I'll eliminate you." Eric could sense the intensity of her fury. Hastily, he stuttered, "Nope, they're all right here. I'm the only one with them." He patted his computer and pulled up the file. "You fool. We've been hacked. They've gone viral and I'm ruined. Can this life get any worse?" Sobbing and wailing, she collapsed to the floor. Unsure of what to do, Eric dashed to his father's office and they both hurried back to the commotion. Carolina, the two great minds, decided to escort her back home, close the door, and return to work. 5 years later, Carol had to step down from her principal position as she had lost the respect of staff, students, and the school board. A new role was created for her, leveraging her expertise in an unfinished basement office where she reviewed state and national procedures and guidelines. Having minimal face-to-face interaction with other employees and none with students, she wore flannel pajama bottoms and fluffy slippers, arriving at the building at 6 a.m. and leaving an hour before school ended. Her notoriety forced her to live as a social outcast, traveling out of town to buy groceries. Sam often found himself sent home for fighting. It's hard not to fight when his classmates kept referring to his mother as Lassie the Wonder Dog. Initially, several men expressed interest in her, sending dog biscuits with their phone numbers attached, hoping for a response. Tyndall Manufacturing's financial position took a nosedive after my departure. Losing customers to Donin Manufacturing, increased CFO and COO expenses, and poor management by Eric doomed the company's economic viability. To settle debts, Edward had to sell the family's legacy 160-acre farm, which would be developed into mid-priced housing. A business broker found a buyer for the company, and Edward made the decision to sell, effectively ending the family business. Edward and Sally rented a small apartment that ate up a significant portion of their Social Security check. When Edward and Sally pass away, the only remnant of the Tyndall family in town will be on tombstones. Eric and Sam departed, starting new careers as a used car salesman and a burger flipper. On July 1st, the company purchaser convened an all-employee meeting to introduce the new president. Edward and Eric were not invited, but the new shop foreman, John Brown, grabbed the crowd's attention and exclaimed, "Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to our new president, Mr. Joe Donin." The staff was relieved to learn that they were acquired by a competitor rather than a large conglomerate that might liquidate assets and lay off employees. The real surprise came when I emerged from the office, mumbling and gazing around. "Hello, everyone. It's good to be back in this building. Did you miss me?" This was met with resounding cheers. "I suppose Eric wasn't as competent a president as he thought." After assuring the assembled Donin Manufacturing employees of the anticipated growth and utilization from the former Tyndall Manufacturing, the employees began chanting Donin, Donin, Donin. "Of course, the name on the building and your paycheck will be Donin Manufacturing," I declared, eliciting more cheers. "Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm confident this will be a positive change for all of us. Now, allow me to introduce you to my family, my wife, Mickey D., and our son, Timothy Joseph Donovan. Yes, DNA confirmed he's my son,